Hi everyone, good morning. Martha Ermias here, coming to you live from Columbus, Ohio. How's everybody doing today? Today's Thursday, almost the end of the week again, and this is our morning Facebook Live again. Hi Tolda, nice to see you here. Good morning. Hope you're hope you're having a great day. Hi Lily, good morning. Hope you're having a good morning. Hi Mom from Maryland, how are you doing? Good to see you guys here. So today I will be talking about one of my favorite subjects. There was a book that I read many years ago that opened me up to the whole idea of the subject that we're going to be talking about today. But before I start, I want to ask you guys a question. Have you ever felt like saying no to something when someone asks you for something, like your services, maybe help or anything? Has saying no made you feel bad? Do you feel bad when you say no, or do you feel guilty, or do you feel like it's going to damage or hurt the relationship? Or do you feel bad when other people say no to you? You know, that's something that we're going to talk about today. Hi Jerry. Hi Dowie Tom. Good morning. Hi Isaias, nice to see you guys here. So today we're going to talk about boundaries, okay? It's one of my favorite subjects. I read a book many years ago. The title of the book is Boundaries, and it says how to say yes, when to say yes and how to say no to take control of your life. And prior to reading that book, I didn't understand the concept of boundaries. And I knew for sure there were some things that I wasn't very happy about in terms of, you know, to be honest, I don't think I had very healthy boundaries. You know, if my friends asked me to be somewhere, I would be there just because they're my friends. And even if I don't want to, I would go ahead and do it. And I would spend a lot of time trying to make other people happy. And in the process, what I started to find out is that I was not happy. I felt like I was in control of my life, and I didn't know what was wrong with it until I actually ran across this book called Boundaries, and I started reading it, and it's really changed my life. It really did. And this is like a long time ago, right after graduate school, but it has really served me really well. Hi Aman, good morning. Hope you're doing great. Nice to see you here. Yeah, so today I will be talking about boundaries. So boundaries are very important. First of all, what are boundaries? You know, boundaries are property lines of a human being that limit what's good for that person, you know, that allow what's good for that person to come into the soul, and also keep what's not good for that person away from the soul. So basically it's really invisible line that protects the person emotionally, physically, and mentally. Okay, so boundaries are, every person has a limit and they know where their boundaries lie, and they're very important because they really affect our happiness. They also affect how we are effective in life, and whether or not we're able to accomplish our own goals. Boundaries are very important. And by reading that book, I understood one thing. You know, there are three kinds of people with three different kinds of boundaries. There are people with poor or no boundaries. Either they don't have boundaries, or they don't understand the concept of boundaries, or they have really poor boundaries. These are the kind of people where whenever they're asked to do something, their answer is always yes. They're always saying yes because saying no is a bad thing for them. They see it as a bad thing. So, you know, I remember one person in particular, in a specific situation, you know, somebody asked that person to get them something, and it was in a community setting, and they walked away to get that, and another person found them and asked them to do something. So they forgot the first person and started to do what the second person asked them. And by the third person, and then another third person asked them to do something, and they started doing. So they actually broke two promises in just like maybe 10 minutes period of time. and then started doing what the third person asked them, because this person really doesn't know how to say no. And of course, for person number one and person number two were upset because that person said yes and they never did it. So people who always say yes to everything, hi Eden, hi Goetz, nice to see you guys here. People who say yes to everything, they just are not in control of their life, and they're not happy because of that. So, and then there are a second kind of group of people where they say no to everything. And so basically, instead of having like healthy boundaries, these kind of people actually are they block themselves. You know, they just push everything out, and they really don't let even the good stuff in. And those people are not connected. You know, they're very isolated, they're not connected. And it's really not healthy, because we're, as human beings, connection is one of our needs. So, but the people with healthy boundaries, they're very connected. They also know how to separate themselves. They separate and connect properly. They know when to say no, and they know when to say yes, to keep themselves healthy and to keep their relationship healthy as well. So a few things that I'm going to be mentioning about is, like, a lot of times there are some myths that make people feel like setting the correct kind of boundaries is a bad thing. And so by looking at these things, maybe there's something that we can learn in terms of really setting good boundaries. So number one, what are some myths about boundaries? Number one, when I say no or set limits, I am being selfish. You know, sometimes people feel like saying no is being selfish. You know, they want, by saying yes, they feel like they're being selfless. However, that's actually a confused perspective of everything, because we as human beings should choose when to say no, when to say yes, based on our core values, based on what we can do and what we can't do. We are responsible for making those choices, and we're also responsible for living with the consequences of those choices. We cannot blame or make anybody responsible for the consequences of our own actions. So if I'm going to be responsible for the consequences, I also have to be responsible for making the choices. So saying no is really not being selfish. Like, if you're going to say no, you probably have a good reason why you're saying no. And it's very important that we know when to say no in order for us to protect or to nurture, to have a healthy emotional and mental and physical being. Number two, if I say no, I am being disobedient. And a lot of times, you know, as kids, when we're growing up, we're supposed to obey our parents and be able to, follow their guidance and everything. But sometimes, that can translate when, even as adults, we don't grow out of that and start making our own choices. Sometimes it's important that we say no in a proper way, but it is really, saying no is just communication. It's not a bad thing. It's communication. It's not being disobedient. So that's another myth that, a lot of people may have. Number three, another myth about boundaries. If I set limits, I'm going to lose love or get hurt. And this is fear of abandonment. People who have been abandoned before, they don't want to lose relationships, and so most of the time they tend to say yes to everything because they don't want to lose a relationship. My understanding of this is, if a relationship is based on unhealthy boundaries, it's not a good relationship in the first place. And a good relationship, you won't lose a good relationship just because you exercised your boundaries. That's the reality of it. But actually, in fact, what actually happens is, because a lot of times people don't honor your boundaries because you fail to communicate your boundaries. And that's something that's very, very important, because a lot of times people with weak boundaries, they don't communicate their boundaries. And then if you don't communicate your boundaries, how are people to know what's good for you and what's not good for you, what you're okay with and what you're not okay with? there's no way for them to know. So it's very important that you actually communicate it. Myth number 4, if I set boundaries, I will hurt others. This is actually the reverse of it, you know. I would lose a relationship, and now people feel like if I say no, that person's going to be hurt. That's actually not a reality. No, again, is a communication. It's a word. No is as good as yes. It shows where the other person is okay with and is not okay with, and the other person will not get hurt. And if they do, then it only shows that they also have boundary issues. And the only way, they need to start to get used to that. They need to start to get used to respecting other people's boundaries. And that could be a healing process for them as well, if they do. But most of the time, it's a myth. It's a feeling that people with who don't have good boundaries feel like if they say no, they're going to hurt other people. But that's really not the reality. Number 5, boundaries means I'm angry. And to be honest, I used to feel that way. You know, if I say no, other people are going to think that I'm not happy. That's what I used to think, but it's really not. It's not truth. Hi, Bini. Nice to see you here. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that you're angry if you set boundaries and limits. Setting boundaries and limits has nothing to do with anger, and that's another myth that people have. And then the other myth, number 6, is when others set boundaries, it injures me. Also, people who have who don't have good boundaries themselves, they also are not very good at accepting other people's boundaries. You know, they feel like they take it very personal. They take it as a rejection. They take it as you know, as something that's really, really bad when other people set boundaries. So that's also a myth. You know, it's two-way system. We have to know how to honor and set our own boundaries and respect, because it's really our responsibility, nobody else's, and communicate those boundaries as well in a very loving way, and also learn to honor and respect other people's boundaries as well. And that's when healthy relationships that benefit both people start to flourish. Healthy boundaries are very important to have real healthy relationships that are based on good connections. And number 7, setting boundaries makes me feel guilty or bad. And if setting boundaries makes you feel guilty or bad, then you probably have the wrong understanding of boundaries. Saying no or setting limits and boundaries, again, is your responsibility. There's nothing to feel bad about. There's nothing to feel guilty about. And you won't. It actually will create more freedom in your life. Hi, Sari. Nice to see you here. So those are some of the myths. And then also another understanding, number 8, is that boundaries are permanent. Boundaries are not permanent. You can always adjust them based on the relationship and based on how far you want to go in the relationship as well, or what's acceptable to you or not as you mature and grow as well. So they're not permanent, but they need to be there in order for the person to be healthy and for the person to be able to connect and create a healthy relationship. All right, so what's the reality about, we talked about some myths of boundaries, but what's the reality about boundaries? And I have 6 points here. Number 1, we are personally responsible for our actions and consequences. I kind of touched upon this. This is one law, that whatever we do or whatever actions that we take, and the results of that, we are responsible for the results of that. You know, sometimes, you know, people say, we're also very responsible for our behaviors. We're responsible for our emotions. You know, sometimes people say, this is one thing that kind of makes me like laugh. You made me angry. They say that, right? No, I chose to be angry. The action that the other person did, yes, I can, you know, like call them out on that. You know, you did this and I'm not happy about that. But like letting the person own your emotion, responsibility of your emotion, is the wrong thing. Nobody can make you angry. You chose to be angry. So that's one thing, that we are responsible for our behaviors, for our emotions, and for our actions and for the consequence of that. Knowing that, we start to take a good care of our internal being, emotions and thoughts and things like that. And if we're more responsible, we're able to build healthier relationships as well. And the second thing is, I think I touched upon this already. We are responsible for our feelings, actions, and behaviors. When we take responsibility for others, we keep them in an immature state. And like the same thing, not just for ourselves, but for the feelings of others. When we take responsibility for the feelings of others, you know, he feels bad or she feels bad, so I'm sorry I made you feel bad. That's a wrong word again. When we start to take responsibility for how other people's, or I'm sorry I made you think this way. You can't make somebody think in a specific way. They choose to think. So their thoughts, their emotions are their own responsibilities. And when you, in your communication, you're taking responsibility for the things that you're not responsible for, which is emotions and thoughts of other people, you actually are not allowing them to grow. You're keeping them in a very immature state. So understanding that feelings, emotions, attitudes, our thoughts are our own responsibility. Every single person has a responsibility for them, and it's not the responsibility of the other being that you're relating to. Helps you grow and helps them grow as a person as well into a mature relationship. And then third thing is, we cannot change anybody else, but we can change ourselves. And this is also another understanding that a lot of times, you know, people would say, I would do this if she did this. I would do this if he did this. Now, expecting for other people to change so that it can suit us or it can fit our need it's like a wish that's never going to come true. You know, no, everybody is responsible for their own transformation, for their own change, and they have to be willing to go that route as well. And we can never change other people. But what we can do is we can take responsibility of our own transformation and our own change. We can change ourselves. So understanding that is also understanding proper boundaries. You know, we don't have the rights to change other people. That's their boundary. And then we need to respect that. But we do have the rights to change ourselves. And a lot of times, by changing ourselves, we can inspire change in other people. You can only inspire. You can never dictate or make other people the way you want them to be. So that's a fact. That's a law in this world that we all have to accept. Number 4, we need to learn to hear other people's no's. Very important. We need to learn to hear other people's no's and respect it. And again, this goes back, when you learn about your own boundaries, you also start to learn about other people's boundaries and you start to respect them. We have to hear it when other people are saying, no, I don't want this. And we have to respect it. And this is very, very important because when we're not respecting other people's boundaries, then we're not really caring for them as a person. That's when it becomes, it becomes very unhealthy. And there's no way that we can develop a good relationship with that person as well. Number 5, boundaries help us gain control over our own lives, and we experience freedom and responsibility. Boundaries are really good when we start exercising good boundaries. And again, good boundaries, they're designed to keep the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. What is good stuff? Love, connection, bonding, growth, things that bring maturity, good information. All of that is the good stuff. What's the bad stuff? Bad stuff is envy, anger, and things like that, that would damage relationships in other people and hurt other people. It's supposed to keep it out as well. So developing good boundaries and good healthy boundaries, what that allows a person to become is more free in their own environment. It creates more freedom. It creates more responsible. You become more responsible, and you also become motivated because you are in control of your life. More than anything, boundaries allow you to control your life, your emotion, your feelings, and your thoughts. And when you're responsible for your emotion and your thoughts and when you know that the consequences of your behavior, your thoughts and your feelings and all of that stuff, you are going to live with it, you become more responsible for it. So boundaries create more freedom and individual responsibility as well. And number 6, internal boundaries need to be evident and communicated to others. I kind of touched upon this one as well. It's our responsibility to let other people know where our boundaries are. And the one way we could do that is by practicing how to say no. And that was one of the things that I really learned from the book. Saying no, and again, there was a lot of emotions attached to saying no, that I didn't like saying no to a lot of things. I felt like maybe I'm insulting the person, or I'm making them feel bad, by rejecting them. There's so many things that were associated with the word no. But once I learned that no is actually a communication method, to a word that communicates boundaries and lets the other person know where my boundaries are, and that I'm responsible in communicating that, responsible in nurturing, keeping that boundary, then I started falling in love with the word no. Okay, of course you have to learn when to say yes and when to say no. All no's are not healthy either. However, being afraid to say no is really not healthy. And this is in many settings, like whether it's within your workplace, with your boss. A lot of times when there's a power, like there's a higher power than you, then you might be afraid, or if I say no, this is going to happen. But if you don't limit, or if you don't show your boundaries, then if other people are pushing your boundaries, it's really not their fault, because they don't know where your boundaries lie. So it's our responsibility to actually really show them where our boundaries are. And by doing that, people respect it. And it's really funny, guys. When you show your boundaries, most of the time, people actually respect it. People respect it most of the time, unless some people have boundary issues themselves. When they have boundary issues themselves, even though they know you're setting the boundaries, they want to trespass and break those boundaries. And when that happens, that relationship is really not healthy, and they need help. They probably need to read the book. But most of the time, if people are not respecting your boundaries, it's because you're really not showing your boundaries clearly. And it's our responsibility to show our boundaries clearly. And also, the other way that we show our boundaries clearly is by respecting other people's boundaries, making them feel good when they set the boundaries, accepting it, making them feel good, honoring and respecting it, making them feel like it's a good thing for them to set the boundaries and say no and things like that. When we do that, we are also showing our own boundaries, and we're also respecting other people's boundaries. All right, so that's about it for today, guys. I know this was kind of a short session, but this is my favorite subject, and I'm sure I'll bring it up again. However, if you guys want to dig deeper and really learn about boundaries, I really suggest that you really read or recommend the book Boundaries. It's by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. It's a bestseller book, and they've written so many different books on boundary after that. They've written Boundaries in Marriage. They've written Boundaries with Children. There's probably more stuff out there, but the original book was Boundaries. So I really recommend you guys read that book if you really like this information and you want to dig deep on it. Okay, so thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. And if you enjoyed this session, please go ahead and share it. I always appreciate you for doing that. And tomorrow is the end of the week. Friday, I'm going to have my last Facebook Live for the week. And whatever it is that you're doing, if you haven't accomplished your goals for this week, you have 2 days to do it. Go for it and push forward. And until I see you guys again tomorrow, God bless you all. Bye-bye.